Welcome to the Riverside Project podcast. We are mobilizing Houston to empower families and transform generations. We hope these conversations will give you a greater understanding of the issues facing our community and inspire you to find your place along the river.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Riverside Project podcast. Today, our guest is Julie Dumalet. She has led the Archdiocesan Office of Pro-Life Activities here in Houston since 2016. She holds a BA from the University of Notre Dame, a JD from Vanderbilt University, and a certification in healthcare ethics from the National Catholic Bioethics Center. The Pro-Life Office continually seeks new ways to promote the dignity of human persons through initiatives such as the St. Joseph Ministry for foster care children and families, which we're going to talk about today. But Julie, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Chandler. It's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Good job with getting Archdiocesan.
I know.
I know that's a hard word to say for most of us too. So.
Yeah, I had to double check myself on that one.
Good job.
Yeah,
Good job
thanks so much for being here. Thanks for taking time. I know schedules are busy, but
it's great to be here with you.
Yeah, it's so funny. You were saying like even traffic, like just getting over here.
Just traffic, and you never know. It could be good. It could be bad. It could be really bad. Yeah. So you just kind of.
But seriously, I know your schedule is super packed and always busy. But thanks for taking time to be with us.
Yeah, glad to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like how we start every episode. I mean, just tell us a little bit about who you are. Obviously, you have an extensive bio, but tell us about who you are, what you do, what your role has looked like here in Houston, things like that.
Sure. So I've been here in Houston for almost 9 years now. We were just talking about that before the show. Which is getting to be a long time, but I am the director of the Pro-Life Office for the Archdiocese, just say the Catholic Church in Houston, right? And so that entails a lot of things, as you can imagine. We have ministries for, of course, pregnant moms that are having difficult pregnancies or women with young children. We have ministries for healing and all kinds of healing. So healing after abortion. Healing after miscarriage, support after miscarriage, support for prenatal diagnosis. So in other words, a family is told, your child maybe has Down syndrome or they have a condition that one might be said is not compatible with life, right? And so what kind of support can we give?
Right.
And then we do some bioethics teaching as well. And then our newest ministry through the office, of course, is the St. Joseph Ministry, which you and I have been working closely on.
Yeah. Talk to me, I guess for one, I'd love to hear what is the scope of the Catholic Church here in Houston? Like how many parishes are you working with? What does that typically look like in your office? And then I would love to hear a little bit, I mean, you and I, like you said, kind of get to talk frequently and we get to work with different parishes across our city, but would love to hear, why child welfare, why St. Joseph, things like that.
Yeah, great question. So the Archdiocese goes, our geographic area is from Huntsville in the north to Galveston in the south, and then really from Baytown in the east to Sealy in the west. So it's quite a large geographic area. There's about 2.7 million Catholics in that geographic area. And then, of course, many, many more people that we're called on to minister as well, too, in that area. We have about 150 parishes in that geographic region. Yeah. And at any given time, I'm probably working with between 30 and 50 of them.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. And what does your day-to-day typically look like?
My day-to-day.
Because that seems like a large, amount of parishes to work with.
But. It's a large amount of parishes, and there's a large amount of things that can come up. So sometimes it feels like your day is putting out fires, right? But it really is supporting our parish ministries. So Gabriel Project, which is our ministry to moms in need, is a parish-based ministry. So we have teams at about 35 different parishes. Yeah. But of course, questions come up. We have a mom that's homeless. We have a mom who is having difficulty accessing healthcare. We have a mom that we think maybe is a victim of human trafficking. And so oftentimes it's working to try to navigate those more unusual situations, but those more serious situations. This morning I worked with a woman who had an abortion 48 years ago and is seeking healing from that experience, which was a really beautiful conversation. We were able to talk, and she said, I feel like there's maybe some hope, now after this conversation. And that's, as somebody in ministry, that's the best thing.
Yeah.
That's the best compliment somebody can give you.
Yeah.
Right. But why child welfare? So I think when people hear the term pro-life, they think pregnancy, babies, abortion. And the way that we look at pro-life in the Catholic Church is much broader than that, in that pro-life is fundamentally about human dignity.
Right.
And so, it's fundamentally about supporting the family and making sure that we have strong families. So we would say in the Catholic Church that the basic unit of society is not the individual, it's the family.
Right.
And so if you are unfortunate not to have a strong family supporting you, especially as a young person, that's really going to be a challenge for you going forward. And so we kind of will say, okay, well, let's not, we want to help people wherever they are, wherever they're vulnerable. But I think what I was starting to see with some of our pregnancy care ministries, some of our maternal care ministries, is how can we grow and expand so that we're providing more consistent support and better support across the life cycle to people in our communities that are vulnerable.
Yeah.
And so foster care really was an obvious way to start doing that. So as you know, I did a little bit of investigating, trying to find some people to connect with, and some wonderful people connected me with Riverside Project, really about 2 years ago now. And so we've been doing this since then.
Yeah, no, thanks for sharing that. And I think kind of like, and you and I talk often, but like that kind of continuity of care and just even recognizing, I guess we would use the word like holistic care.
Exactly.
Even of recognizing, hey, like these social issues, as we talk often here, and you know this well, are not like meant to be siloed out, but they're all like kind of interconnected to some degree. And foster care sometimes finds itself kind of in this like middle like section, right, of the river as we talk about. And I even wonder alongside that, like how has the concept even of the river, I know that was, obviously you've become familiar with that over the years, but how has that even maybe shifted, helped kind of provide perspective to some of the ministries that you are already interacting with, and kind of bringing the idea of St. Joseph ministry, foster care, child welfare, like to these parishes?
So what's exciting, I think it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because everyone is familiar. I think most people are familiar with Catholic teaching on pro-life and life issues. Right. And so oftentimes people that will come to the pro-life office, right, that's the name of my office, will come and they'll think it's about a certain thing. Specifically, this is going to be about preventing abortion. This is going to be about praying outside a clinic. And yes, those things are important, and we need to have those conversations and keep having those conversations. Sure. But that's not all of what it's about. So sometimes I get a sense in talking to people, it's like, oh, foster care, how does that relate to abortion? And so it's kind of trying to educate about, we need to think more holistically about people who are vulnerable, in all kinds of ways, not just women and men that are vulnerable to abortion, but vulnerable across the life cycle. But then on the other side of that, the more positive side is there's a lot of people who, rightly or wrongly, just don't want to have the political argument. So they hear pro-life. It's, I don't want to get into that. That's, I just don't want to be fighting all the time. Sure. And we know how contentious our political discourse is. So to be able to walk in and say, well, guess what? Young adults, for example, you don't have to go pray outside an abortion clinic to support vulnerable families. What if you were to assist in this way? What if you were to become a babysitter for a foster family? So that those parents can have some respite care. What if you were to cook meals for kids living in a group home? What if you were to go visit kids living in a group home? What if you were to do, we can talk about all the different creative ways that people have found to be involved in this space, but you see that energy come to them because it's, wow, I can help people in this new and exciting way.
Yeah.
That's really meaningful to me, but I'm not going to have this vicious, political, contentious conversation with anybody.
No, definitely. And I love kind of like even what you're suggesting there. It's like that, hey, this is something to rally behind. This is something to unify around.
Absolutely.
And you and I'd like to hear a little bit, and we can probably both share a little bit about how we go in and work with a particular parish and church and kind of bring them kind of along on this journey. Like you mentioned of like, hey, like becoming more aware, becoming more educated about child welfare, and then ultimately finding like, where does your parish, where does your parishioners like kind of fit into this space?
Exactly.
And what I do love about just the child welfare space is there really is a plethora of places for people to step in.
There really are. And that was when I first started to approach the space, and I think this is where a lot of people who haven't been in the foster care space or the child welfare space, there's a lot of apprehension because it seems so big. The need seems so great.
Yeah.
And there's so much that you don't know. Right. And so there's a lot of, I think for me, there was a feeling, how can I ever make a difference? How can I ever just wrap my head around what is needed, in a way that I can educate people to get into that space. And I think a lot of people who initially might be attracted have this, well, that sounds great, but I've never dealt with people who've experienced significant trauma. I've never dealt with people with significant needs of whatever kind, and I just don't feel ready to leap into that. And so, of course, as you know, what we try to tell them, well, let's start with something where you're not, one-on-one mentoring a young person that's just aged out of foster care, because that's a big ask. Maybe your parish could move into a space where you're assisting with groceries of somebody, or you're assisting with bedding for a new kinship family, or all of those kinds of things. So it's trying to start people slowly and saying you don't have to eat the whole apple in one bite. You can just take.
Yeah. And I've loved our partnership specifically over the last couple of years because you're kind of, for lack of better words, like scope in which like the parishes are spread out across the city is a similar like scope and landscape to what we're working with when we talk about foster care here in Harris County and the surrounding
I think
counties.
our geographic area, didn't we determine, is basically contiguous? So it's or coterminous.
That's a much
what's
more
the word?
eloquent way to say that.
What's
than what
the word?
I said.
I don't even know if I used that word correctly, actually, Chandler. So, but yeah, it's been beautiful, and I think what is so helpful to me is to be able to, and just so listeners know, when we first approach a parish, or when a parish will reach out and say, hey, we're interested in learning more about this space, but we have no idea what we might do. We have no idea who, either on our staff or on our volunteer base, we might include in the conversation. And so I have the knowledge of how the church works as kind of as a corporate entity, and even somewhat how individual parishes work. And what Riverside is just great at bringing to the table is to be able to say, okay, these are the needs in your backyard. Right? You don't have to go, if you're in Huntsville, you don't have to drive to Galveston. There's people in need right here, and there's unique ways that you can serve them. And here are some of the agencies, again, 3 miles down the road, that you might be able to work with.
It's the idea, right, that we talk often about, is that like context is so key in all of these things. And what our partnership has done a really great job is really answering, when we talk about church mobilization here in Houston, we always jump to these two questions, right? And I know you know these well, but it's the question of like, what is the need that actually exists right here within this particular part of the city? And how is this particular church uniquely positioned to care for those needs?
Exactly.
And the like nuance of even like the Catholic Church or another denomination is just becoming more contextual with a particular area or a particular need or a particular family. And so I love like how specific we have been able to be, and the intentionality behind how we've been able to work with some of the parishes together. So
very much. And, even connecting some of our Catholic parishes to existing churches of other faiths that are already in the space. So I know we were, chatting with one parish a few months ago about, okay, so you'd like to host a parents' night,
right?
Or a parents' night out, I guess. Maybe you don't want to do that every month, but guess what? Down the road, there's this parish or this church and this church that are already doing that. So what if you could partner with them and you're doing it once every 3 months, but then you're helping them when they're hosting as well. So it's not asking people, it's not such a big ask. Right. And I think you run into two things. There's kind of the people that I referenced that are a little bit nervous about getting into this space because they just don't know what to expect or they don't feel like they're properly educated. But then, you get the people, it's like, we want to do absolutely everything. We want to start with 10 projects. And you and I have kind of said, so how about if you start with 1 or 2? Wouldn't that be good? And, I think we do a good job of trying to encourage people to start slowly, get your feet under you. And then we can always expand.
It feels backwards, right? And you said this earlier where it's like when you look at child welfare and you look at the foster care space and the needs that exist around them, right? Mm-hmm. They're daunting, they're massive, and there's many. And so to be entities in that, like you as like a leader within the Catholic Church community, and then even like Riverside Project and other nonprofits, to be the people who says, hey, the needs are daunting, the needs are many, but let's slow down enough to address them holistically and with care in a way that is sustainable in the long term is very significant. And I wonder even like if you can talk through like how we, and really you, like have done such a great job of rallying churches here in the city to say, hey, this is how we like address these particular issues. Because the Catholic Church I've been extremely impressed with, right? Where it's like there's needs that pop up in our city. And like, for those who are listening, like the diocese and like all these parishes in our city do such an excellent job of meeting needs. And we probably honestly aren't super aware of how many needs. And you could probably speak to the like the scope of that. But you guys meet a ton of needs within the parishes across the city. And so it's awesome to already have avenues where, needs for these families, like, or resources for these families can be tapped into that are in the system, but also, it's helping parishes figure out like, this is kind of a newer space and this is what that looks like.
You're right about that. So the church does have a lot of existing, if you want to call them social service agencies. Of course, we have Catholic Charities, which is in the center of town and then has a large facility out in Fort Bend County. But the St. Vincent de Paul Society, for example, I think we have probably 50 of our 150 parishes have some type of St. Vincent de Paul Society. And what that organization exists to do is help people in need with rent, with utilities, sometimes with food, sometimes with clothing, all of those types of things. So when we've walked into a parish that has an existing St. Vincent de Paul Society or an existing outreach ministry, right? That's more or less doing the same thing. They're not having to reinvent the wheel. We can say, you're already doing this work and you're doing it really well. Would you be open to opening that door just a little bit wider, maybe to incorporate people in the foster care space? And so the way that works practically is once a parish signs up for the response network, as you guys call it, a caseworker can reach out and say, hey, we have a foster family. Can you meet that need? And usually our parish teams will see that email well before I will. And we'll have responded to it and said, yep, done. What else do you need? Right. So, which has really been nice to see that there's energy around that kind of thing.
You guys have already so many of the parishes have resources readily available. And it's exactly like what you just said. It's just coming in and saying, for some parishes, it's like just opening it a little bit wider to the degree of like, hey, have you considered the foster care community in this? And it's a lot of times it's like, haven't really thought about it like that, but there's space for that. Right. And then other parishes is like, I I haven't thought about any of these things, right? And so how do we start stepping into this, and what does this look like? And so I wonder if we can talk through even like, what does it look like to walk with a parish? What does the trainings look like? Things like that you're encouraging parishes to consider as they kind of step into this space and work.
Yeah. So you guys have a wonderful orientation. The name, can you shout out the name of your orientation program?
Just the church leader training.
Church mobilization or church leadership training. Yeah. So obviously we want people to go to that. Yeah. That's a half-day program that's really, really wonderful. Yeah. I think anybody that wants to be, not necessarily work with families in the foster care space or youth in the foster care space, but if you're going to be a leader in that space for your parish, probably TBRI or trust-based relational intervention training is going to be really helpful. I had my first session
I heard you just
with you guys. I did. I had my first session last week. It was wonderful. Yeah. Met some great people. But that really makes me obviously not competent yet through one training, but it does help take some of that. I have no idea how I would handle that situation. It's like, oh, that's how you would handle that situation. Yeah. And of course, that takes practice, but taking some of that fear of the unknown out of the way. But another tool that we've used is the parish survey that you and I had connected on putting together. And so what we'll ask a parish to do is roll that out either online or in paper format. And that survey does two things. The first is really to identify parishioners that are attending Mass or that are making use of other ministries in the parish, who either are current foster parents or kinship families, or who have been, and to say, what would you like to see? What would be helpful to you? What would not be helpful to you? What are your biggest needs right now? Because of course, what we never want to do is say, well, let's go help the people out there and not realize we have all these people already in our community that we didn't even bother to ask what they need. So we never want to assume that we know what's best. And we've gotten some really great feedback from some people. This is what I need. And we've kind of identified some trends, right? Which has been great.
Yeah, I think it's another example of like when we talk about working, and this goes across like denominations, across church sizes, like all of these things, but just using you all as an example where it's like you get to walk into a church and say, hey, here's a survey. And it is the like almost putting intentional hurdles, like our friend Jason Johnson talks often about, of like, let's put in intentional hurdles to where it like almost forces us as a community and specifically as a church community to slow down to the degree that we're able to provide care for our own people, or at least like save some room or offer space for, hey, maybe there is a foster parent within our congregation already, or maybe there is a kinship or relative caregiver in our congregation already, or maybe there is group home attendees in our congregations already. And so your like tool that you guys have done a really good job of creating just is the creating the space for that to say, hey, here's a space. Are you already within the walls of our church, and how can we provide care there before we kind of go outside of that? And so it is taking kind of these baby steps toward kind of this holistic care idea.
And so I think to that point, St. Teresa of Calcutta had famously, did all of the missionary work in India during the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. And what she would talk about is, I hope I don't butcher her quote, but it's something to the effect of, if you want to change the world, help the person that's right in front of you, right? And then she would say, find your own Calcutta.
Yeah.
So we have this idea, what she's referencing there, of course, is we have this idea, well, I need to help people in Ukraine. I need to help people in the Middle East. I need to help people right now in North Carolina or Florida. And that, of course, that's all true. We want to do those things, but we don't want to forget that our brothers and sisters in our own community, may also have needs that we're probably better equipped to meet because we can actually talk to them face to face, right? So
I think that's so good. It's just saying, hey, there's so much work to be done here in our city, and so it's been such a great partnership, I think, for us to be able to walk alongside parishes in really a holistic way. I mean, we joke about all the time, like, I'm not Catholic. So you get
Right.
you always tell people, you're like, I get to be the expertise in this like particular area, and Chandler gets to be like the expert like in child welfare things, right? And so we get to kind of tag team and collaborate together and things like that. And
well,
so
there's just a lot of things. There's some bureaucracy. There's, and there's just some things that are done, maybe administratively a little bit differently that it's good to be aware of. But
why a question on that, right? Like I joke about it, but at the same time, like obviously you found like having that kind of partnership really, really important in like for the diocese to have. Kind of like this outside neutral, like nonprofit kind of space versus saying, hey, the diocese could do this on our own. So what kind of went into that decision? What went into kind of thinking through what that would look like?
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess if I came from a different background, as you mentioned, I was a lawyer for about 10 years. Yeah. So I always tell people to pray for my soul, please. But no, it was good. It was just, this is better. Ministry's better. But, if I had been a social worker or had worked in an administrative capacity at a nonprofit, I might be more familiar with the needs and the space and how everything works, but that is just not my area of expertise. And probably anybody sitting in my office, it's not going to be their background.
Sure.
Right. And so part of doing this is realizing, okay, I know what I don't know, or I need to know what I don't know. And I do need, none of us, we talked earlier about the need for family, but none of us are islands unto ourselves. We all need to work with existing ministries, existing organizations. And so that basically is the gist of it. How do I find somebody that's knowledgeable about what I'm not knowledgeable about?
Yeah.
So that I can bring to the table what I have. And if we can combine efforts.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the idea.
Going to work a lot better.
Yeah,
right?
we don't have to recreate the wheel.
Of course.
You're tapped into a community that I personally am not, and vice versa, right? And so it's just saying, hey, how can we like look at the gaps and challenges in our city and kind of address them together?
Exactly. And so much, my supervisor had said a few months ago, we were chatting and he said, so much of what we do is connecting people in need with other people that can help them, or connecting one agency that wants to help with people that know what they need to do.
Yeah.
Right. And so we think, well, I have to go out and create a program. It's like, no, I just have to introduce this person sometimes, right?
Yeah.
I have to introduce this person to this other person.
Yeah. Sometimes it's as simple as that, right?
It can be as simple as that. Yeah. Not always.
Right.
On a good day, it can be as simple as that.
Yeah, so, that's good. Well, talk to me a little bit about like St. Joseph in general. Why the name? Where does that come from? Talk to me about kind of what that has looked like in rolling that out here in our city. How many churches have been involved in the St. Joseph ministry? What are some wins that you're seeing? Things like that.
Sure. So you may have to remind me a part of that question if I forget. But,
because I asked you like 3 of them. Sorry.
It's okay. No, it's okay. So St. Joseph, of course, was Jesus' foster father. And so in the Catholic Church, we tend to pick a patron saint, right, for everything. I think there's a patron saint of TV, there's a patron saint of, all sorts of things. But of course, Joseph was Jesus' foster father and took him in and cared for him and for Mary. And so that always is a good patron to have. If you look at my office, every office has a name of somebody that is the patron. But this idea of a St. Joseph ministry in Texas was started probably 6 or 7 years ago by the Texas Bishops' Conference, which sits in Austin. I'll share with you some more Catholic Church administration. But so we have 16 in Texas geographic regions or dioceses, each of which has its own bishop. And then there's what's called a Bishops' Conference. Some states, New Hampshire, Vermont, have one bishop and the entire state is one diocese. Here in Texas, everything's bigger in Texas.
Everything's bigger.
We have 15 or 16, depending on which rite you're asking for.
Yeah.
So that group, that administrative office sits in Austin. because they also serve as a lobbying group sometimes with the legislature. But they came up with the idea of the St. Joseph Ministry, which I got the name from them.
Right.
And they gave us a basic idea of what are the needs. We really would like to see dioceses get into this space in some way. But as you know, administratively, legally, in terms of municipal rules or county rules or all of those things, it's very different depending on what region of the state you're looking at. The needs are very different. The resources available are very different. The rules sometimes are very different. So they could give us a basic framework, but not a lot else, right? So I would say it took probably about a year of working with DFPS, Department of Family and Family Protective Services. I always mess up that acronym.
There are so many acronyms.
There really are.
Yeah.
There really are. It's just not fair. But anyway, so worked with them. They connected me with Riverside Project. We had some talks back and forth. And then it's been about a year and a half that we've been directly working with parishes. So in that time, I want to say right now, we're working in some capacity with about 35 of our parishes, which may not sound like a lot. That's slightly over 20%, but given how recently we've instituted this, it actually is quite successful. We're working with some of our university students, which is very exciting. They're hard to pin down because they're university students and their schedules are what they are. But there is a lot of interest.
Yeah. Can you explain that a little bit, like to our audience that might not be familiar? When you say university students, what does that look like?
Of course.
Talking about campus ministry, right?
Yes. So campus ministry, of course, we have the Catholic University here, University of St. Thomas in the Montrose area. But we also have what are called Newman Centers. And Newman Center is kind of the Catholic University center at any given campus. So there's a Catholic Newman Center at Texas A&M in Galveston. Rice University has one. University of Houston has a Catholic center. Sam Houston State up in Huntsville has a Catholic center, right? TSU has a Newman Center. And so what we've done is not too different from what we've done with parishes, where we'll go in, talk to campus ministry team and say, hey, we think this would be an excellent opportunity for your students to get involved. Of course, it's got to be more regimented and a little bit more scheduled just because they're not there all the time. But that's kind of where we've gone with them. And maybe I've mentioned it, maybe I haven't, but we've seen so much energy from our young adults in particular around this. So if there's, for whatever reason, this is just kind of something that they see the need for. There's a lot of fire that they have for this project, for this ministry.
Yeah, I think some of it is to say, like, it's breaking the, I guess, presupposition of foster care equals I need to open my home. And then it flips it on its head a little bit and says, no, foster care ministry, foster care support, it actually can look like a myriad of things, right?
It can.
It can look like, we talk about with some of these students, it can look like you're already tabling during the week on your campus, like table for.
About this.
Yeah,
Well, I love the idea that you had about, can you pay for someone to do their laundry?
Right.
Which would
for
cost
like a
you
young adult,
For a young adult, for maybe like a week. Yeah. Most of us have $1 that we can spare. Yeah. Right. And that's an awesome, tangible way, but it's educating young people as well. Like, really? There's people that don't have $1 for their laundry? Or like, you have to pay for your laundry because you don't have a washer dryer at your house? It's like,
it's just, I think it's more than just building awareness. It's building access. For, like in this case, right, campus university students, but it can be for adults or individual churches or community members who are just, you're building in access to say, oh, I didn't realize that I could use this to provide holistic and sustainable care for a family.
Right.
And it's just like, I think very eye-opening. And I personally have been very encouraged with how many parishes have been just like all in of just saying, like, we're in. Some
Right.
saying, hey, we already do all of these things.
Sure.
We're happy to like open the door wider, as you said earlier.
Exactly.
And then some saying, oh, I didn't realize that this fits here. We can definitely do that. Hadn't thought about it like that before.
Right.
And it's just like a pivoting and an adjustment of saying, hey, like let's offer this kind of service to this part of the community that we have long forgotten.
Right. Or that we're not even aware of.
Right.
Sometimes. So many times we'll send out that parish survey and we'll talk about the results.
Mhm.
I had no idea we had this many foster families, or I
Right.
had no idea that, okay, we don't have foster families, but we have a lot of kinship families.
Mhm.
And, you kind of, it's always eye-opening to get those results. I think, one thing that we were talking about earlier that I think is so great, because there's, on some people, it's parishioners will say and pastors will say, well, wow, I want to help. This is a very worthy ministry, worthy cause, but I have no idea what I'm doing, right? And so I need to sit and think about this for a little bit. And so what's been beautiful about the partnership with Riverside is we walk into a parish, we talk to them, and it's not like, okay, I need to know in a month what you're going to do.
Yeah.
And we need to get going, and that's what you're locked into.
Yeah.
Right? And so it takes varying amounts of time for a community to figure out, how are we going to serve? Sometimes there's an existing ministry that we can plug right in.
Right.
Sometimes it's about building a team or educating a team to do something. And sometimes it's about offering people options, choose one. Sometimes it's about, we want to create our own thing.
Yeah.
Okay, great. We'll walk alongside you doing that too.
Yeah. It's like kind of like eliminating the one size fits all for every single church and every single like congregation member.
Because you work with people in need. That never works. And that's realistically, that's not how people exist in the world.
Exactly. And so it's providing, again, access and freedom to a parish, right? To be able to say, hey, like, we want to like serve in this way. Like, what would that look like, right? And working with an individual parish over a period of time.
Well, because ultimately we don't want to do the thing where we say, well, okay, do this, and it's not a great fit, but the parish starts doing something, working with actual individuals in need. And then they realize, this isn't going to work. We have to back out of that space.
Yeah.
And you never want to do that with people that are, with anybody, but especially with people that are vulnerable, that maybe have had a lot of people back out on them before. We want to be the stabilizing force to the extent that we can. So
no, definitely. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Well, obviously we just have a couple of minutes more,
Okay.
but we're curious to what have you found to be really encouraging as you've worked with the different parishes across the city and in the space? When we talk about St. Joseph ministry, and what has been like really challenging at the same time?
I mean, the challenges we've already talked about a little bit. Just there's kind of a sense of hesitancy sometimes about, am I qualified to help people in this space? I don't feel qualified.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I know how to deal with somebody and that's dealt with trauma. I'm going to mess it up. So therefore I'll kind of step back and not dive in. And the great thing has been, we have great educational resources.
Right.
And we don't just say, okay, we're going to meet once and everything's going to be great. We accompany, really forever.
Yeah.
We continue to accompany because, as you know, we can set something up, a wonderful program at a parish, and the world's going to change around us.
Yeah.
So we've got to be constantly looking at what are we doing? Is this still working?
Right.
Have things changed?
Yeah.
So I mean, that's a challenge, but it's kind of also an opportunity there, And then I think what's been really energizing is the amount of energy that people in the parishes are wanting to put into this, in a way that I have not seen with some of the other things that we do. And especially, we're always trying to get young people involved. You hear so much about young people are leaving the Catholic Church, the Christian Church, leaving faith altogether. So when there's something that they can really feel like they're making a difference and they're energized about it and they want to show up for it, it's like, okay, we've really hit on something important here.
Yeah.
For variety of reasons.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think it's really good. Yeah, I wonder if you can share even like maybe a couple of stories or things that have stuck out to you. Kind of putting you on the spot here, but
No, it's okay. It's
over
okay.
the last couple of years where you're like, man, yeah, like this parish, they did this thing, or they have been thinking about doing this thing or whatever. And like, that's been really, really cool to see them step into that way.
Yeah. I mean, the one that I always go to is our St. Helen community, which is down in Pearland. And they take their youth group once a month and they go to Kids Harbor.
Yeah.
And they, they cook a meal. It's very simple. They cook a meal, they have a meal with the kids, they play games for the afternoon. And they do that once a month. And so they start hopefully building relationship and building a sense of community, right? And is that in and of itself going to completely turn somebody's life around? Probably not. But that coupled with the help, we all have a piece of this. None of us are going to do a miracle and fix somebody or somebody's life or somebody's situation all by ourselves. But what piece are we called to do? Right. Good. So we're gonna take that on. And a lot of our parishes, as you know, are kind of still working out, how exactly are they going to be involved? The number of parishes, I think, as we talked earlier, when we get that call from the response network, and usually it's done and taken care of before I even know that there's been an ask made, right? Which is so neat to see.
Yeah.
So those things are really
it's cool
really
that
great.
The church that you're talking about in Pearland, like I remember when we were there, and I've met kids even since that conversation who have spent time at Kids Harbor, which for our audience is basically an emergency shelter for kids who are kind of in between placements or were emergently removed. And they joke about like, oh, it's the purple shirt group or whatever.
They have, yes.
And so
they
it's
have
this
purple shirts.
But what I love about it is it's St. Helens has made this decision. We are going to consistently show up to this place and we are going to do these things. And I remember when we met with them, it was their kind of like demeanor with it was, hey, we're not like coming here to do like this big Bible study and like all this preaching and all this stuff.
We're not proselytizing.
Like,
we just want to be
we're coming to play. I think she told me like, we're coming to play board games.
Right.
We're trying to bring a sense of normalcy to a space that is anything but
normal.
And so, I think that's just such a really, really good example of like ways that churches can just step in, right?
Very
and that's
much.
That church's thing, right? And there are other churches who are, I think, considering like, well, what does it look like for us to walk alongside a group home or an individual family or like students who have recently aged out of foster care and things like that?
Well, and so many, when we've done the survey, just to go back to that, what a lot of those families that are licensed foster families or that are kinship families will talk about, first of all, they'll say, I feel so alone in this space. And I really I need some type of respite.
Right.
Whether that is, I can drop my child off at a parents' night or a parents' afternoon or whatever it is, or there's a group in the parish that will be licensed babysitters to offer some respite care on a Saturday. So my husband and I can take a walk together.
Yeah.
Just anything as simple as that. And you think, well, that doesn't sound like much. And it's like, well, it's not much on one hand, but people tell you, like, I need that. That would make such a difference in my life.
Yeah.
And so being able to do those things for vulnerable families is so important. And then I would say kind of secondarily, with the example you just gave at Kids Harbor, we're teaching our young people, not everybody has it as great as you do. So how are you called to reach out to vulnerable people? How are you called to be in community with other people?
Yeah.
Your brothers and sisters in Christ, basically.
Yeah. No, I think it's really good. Thanks so much for sharing. I wanted to ask you this question. What would you say to somebody who's maybe listening to the podcast that is like maybe a church volunteer, or they're a church leader, or they're a Catholic church leader, or they represent another denomination, but somebody who's saying, hey, like I'm listening to this and I'm seeing and I'm brainstorming like all of the ways that I can step in.
Right.
Where do I start?
Yeah. Give me a call.
Yeah.
Call my office. I'm always happy to talk about this. Chandler and I think are always happy to come and meet you, meet your pastor, meet other volunteer leaders at your parish, and just kind of assess, what does your community currently look like? What are the needs of the area surrounding your parish community? But then also recognizing that you're not called to reinvent the wheel. This is not about, we need to have another line item in the budget, or we need to create an entire new volunteer team to do this. Most of the time, your church will have existing ministries that have some type of service as part of their mission or charism, right? And so identifying those groups and saying, hey, would you once a month be interested in doing X, Y, or Z for an organization that's nearby?
Yeah.
And maybe you identify 5 of those organizations at your parish, and each one can take a little piece.
Yeah.
It can be as simple as that. So it's not about, we have to come up with bylaws and a mission statement and a line item in the budget, because most pastors are going to roll their eyes at that just because they're so busy and there's so much already going on.
Yeah.
But it's just asking people to think about this a little bit differently.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And it's just taking that one small step towards helping like kids and families heal, which is really good. Cool. Well, thank you so much for your time. I have 5 more quick questions.
Okay.
That are kind of a little bit more rapid speed. We
I saw these.
We do them at the end of every podcast.
Okay.
And so I'll kind of go through this list. But here's the first question. Is what was your favorite toy or game as a child?
Okay, so don't judge me, but and you'll understand why. So I loved playing board games.
Okay.
I loved Monopoly. But I got to a point probably in my teenage years where
You're making me nervous.
I couldn't get anyone to play with me because I would get so agitated when I didn't win. So I got banned from Monopoly for a while in my family.
Oh, Monopoly's
the game. Yeah.
I love a good game of Monopoly.
Yes, but I got overly enthusiastic. That's the nicest way that I can put it.
Yeah, that's hilarious. So, I have been in a couple of really serious Monopoly games, so I understand that.
Yeah.
Cool. Second one, what was your very first job and what did you learn from it?
So my first job, I worked in the Tulsa County Courthouse.
Okay.
Grew up in Oklahoma, and I worked in the passport office.
That was your first ever job?
That was my first ever job.
Interesting.
So I got to process people's passports and, tell them. And what I learned from that, people would get very, very upset when they hadn't brought in the wrong documents.
Yeah.
I said, I'm sorry, I can't accept this.
Yeah.
And understandably, because it's a government agency, right? People are tired of bureaucracy. But sometimes, they weren't too happy with me because I was the messenger. So I just learned to deal with people that were not having a good day.
Yeah.
Which I don't know that I did.
It's a good skill set to have.
It's a real good skill. You need that a lot in ministry too. So
yeah, that's good. On the other side of that, what was your dream job as a kid growing up?
Okay, so this makes everybody laugh. When I was 4 years old, I wanted to be one of 2 things. I either wanted to be a nun, or I wanted to be a cheerleader.
Nice.
Okay. And little bit contradictory there, right? I wound up not being either of those things ever. But I had a great aunt who was a nun actually here in Houston at Incarnate Word.
That's cool.
And so she was so excited. She got me a little nun statuette.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, I didn't take religious vows, but that's okay. I didn't become a cheerleader either.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
Okay, number 4. What's a skill that you've always wanted to have but have never had the chance to learn?
Yeah, so my husband is a great singer. He used to be a monk, actually. And so they chanted hours a day. And so he has a wonderful singing voice. And whenever we're in Mass, people will inevitably turn to him at the end and say, you need to join the choir.
Oh, man.
Well, I cannot sing.
Oh.
Not at all. And I've always wanted to be able to, but was not blessed with. And probably if I took lessons, I probably could be decent.
Yeah.
But no. So I kind of try to sing under everybody else.
Kind of let him go.
Yeah. It's like, you're doing good, dear. You go right
That's
ahead.
hilarious.
So yeah.
Cool. Well, last question, kind of back to kind of what you do for work. But when you think about your work within the Office of Pro-Life Activities? What kind of inspires you and really like keeps you kind of devoted to this effort? You've been doing it for years. What kind of keeps you going?
Yeah. So, I mean, I think in any ministry, there's a chance of burnout because you're dealing with people that are having just, not only having a bad day, like we just talked about, but, really are having a bad year or a bad couple of years, right? And, people are not always as patient as you would hope they would be just because they're dealing with stuff. So burnout's a real thing. But I think what is so exciting is when you have that day where you talk to somebody, you have that one-on-one with somebody and they say, thank you, this was so helpful. And you didn't really do anything. All you had was have a conversation with them and maybe give them a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
And they acknowledge that and they tell you thank you. That we help people every day, but most of the time people don't tell you that you were a help. And so just kind of having that affirmation of, you know what, I maybe made somebody's life a little bit easier today. Like that's really energizing.
Yeah.
And that makes it, okay, I can do this one more day. I can do this 2 more days,
Yeah. I totally get that. Well, we are so grateful for the work that you do.
Thank you, Chandler.
Yeah,
likewise.
The work that you guys do really, really matters. Thank you for how you're mobilizing the church here in Houston. And we're grateful that we get to be a part of it. So
thanks you for having us.
Yeah,
and
thanks for being on the podcast.
Thank you for being, for working with us.
Yeah.
It's been a pleasure.
Of course. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Chandler.
To those listening, we hope these conversations have inspired you to find your place along the river. And we welcome you to join us in bringing hope and renewal to the city of Houston. If you'd like more information on how to get involved, please visit riversideproject.org and submit a contact form. We'll see you next time.